everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am the managing director at Sino Insights, a management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Good afternoon, Lei. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, good afternoon. From my side, I am your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number lucky 88.
Baba.
Les Chinois sont arrivés exquisement français. The Chinese have arrived. Pardon my French. So basically, you were in San Francisco earlier this week, and I was in Paris.
Yes.
For the Paris Motor Show. So lots to talk about. I don't know where to begin. This is a trip that I was invited by Mercedes, by the way, for their EQE SUV launch. And this was a 48-hour trip. So I arrived in Paris at about 10:30 a.m. local time on Sunday. And I left, my flight back was on 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday. So it was a 48-hour trip. And so I arrived the afternoon. I had a chance to check out Paris, the Notre Dame Cathedral that was being renovated from that fire. And I finally got to see the Louvre Museum.
Yes.
And the Mona Lisa after all these years that I've been to Paris. The first time I went, the Louvre was on strike.
Oh, jeez.
So I didn't see it. That was 2001. And the last time I was in Paris was 2016, during the Paris Motor Show. And that evening was the EQE SUV launch, which was kind of the culmination of this 6 years of the EQ kind of offensive. It's almost the end of the line because all of the other segment vehicles have been launched. A, B, C, E, S, and the SUV, also the EQV. There's some other AMG models as well. And I also got to talk to Ola Kalinis, the CEO, whom I last met in almost 3 years ago at the Guangzhou Auto Show. Then he was just on the CEO job for half a year, taken over from Dieter Zetsche. And I remember, all these CEOs, whenever they go to China, they would wear a Chinese flag pin on their suits just to kind of show the importance of the market.
Support.
Yeah. And so I got to talk to him, and it was almost a exclusive interview. So I must say, because there was another guy from Global Times who was stationed based in Germany, but he was there, and
you're independent.
I'm more independent. So actually, it was about 25 minutes. I think I asked about five or six questions, and it was mostly on the EQ strategy so far, the electrification, Apple, whether it's a friend or foe, and China, and so. This was the morning of the 17th, after the previous evening when they were launching the global debut.
Well, don't leave out those details. So where were you when the debut? Was it at the Louvre? Was it like...
The debut was at the Musée Rodin.
Okay.
So it's one of those famous...
Another fancy place?
Yeah, fancy place. It's where one of those famous museums where the thinker, the sculpture...
Yep.
The Gate to Hell, and also the Kiss. Those are quite the famous sculptures by this Rodin, the famous sculptist. And so it was almost like and they showed all the EQ models that are launched so far, and also all the concepts, the EQG, the Vision AMG, the EQXX, and then the Maybach, all of these models. So, and I think the interesting point out is we heard about Carlos Tavares's comment on China. And I would say this is a completely at the extreme ends of what Ola said versus what what Carlos said. I think that obviously everybody has their prerogatives or agenda or whatever. But I thought that was an interesting contrast, sharp contrast of the importance of China, first on the Mercedes side of it, and then kind of on the Carlos side, just kind of like, we don't have to be there producing, if so be it. So that was interesting to contrast and compare.
I'm going to tell you what, though. That's what's being said. Tavares is basically giving himself the ability to say what things are being said behind closed doors, likely in Europe and the United States, right? Because it's a reality that these companies kind of do struggle with their JV partners at times and following the rules of what's going on in China. And, generally speaking, they've been living high off the hog, so they've been quick to bite their tongue. And so with Tavares now not manufacturing there and effectively giving up the market, right? Because you're not going to import your way into any type of leadership role in China. And so I just, I think it's okay for him to make these types of comments because his opinion is not unique. Let's just say that.
Well, from the Chinese media chatter, it's almost 100% dunking on Carlos for saying these type of things. We're rolling out the red carpet for you, and in Europe and in China. I think the gist of it is just this partnership with GAC is not going that well. I don't think that's why. Hence the Jeep.
And that's the thing, though, right? Because GAC is going to lose out on this, right? Because Tavares has already calculated in his financial statements the losses that he's going to take. This is where GAC needs to come to the table if they really want to salvage this partnership. Otherwise, they need to find another JV partner, right?
Yeah. And I don't blame him for these comments, but on the China side, at least on the JV side, this is when he was talking about, the PSA, the Citroën and Peugeot, they've actually performed really well the last, actually during the pandemic compared to before, because we know that Dongfeng PSA joint venture, which is called Shenlong in Chinese, was doing really bad. And actually they've recovered quite nicely. And actually you've seen some social media posting by these employees of Shenlong saying, we're on a good way up. And now you have this CEO of the joint venture partner saying that we're going to close shop. So it's kind of...
But that's
not pleasing to hear.
That's kind of the challenge. You and I know this is the challenge with doing business in China. If you say something that even could be partly true, the Chinese media is almost like a monolith. They just are completely offended by it, as opposed to, it's just a single voice, and it's very difficult to be objective when maybe he is saying it with a bit of sour grapes, but it doesn't make it not true, right? And so he inherited a tough situation to begin with, right? So
yeah, and we've seen this play out throughout this year with them announcing first that they were increasing the joint venture equity share in the GAC FCA, and then GAC came out a statement saying, we haven't officially announced it, and now you kind of announced it that we don't agree. So you see that they're not in tune. And then what ended up happening was stopping Jeep production.
I think GAC outplayed their hand because or overplayed their hand, because I don't think they thought that Tavares was going to call their bluff, and he did, and good for him.
And coming back to Mercedes a bit, I met Paul Gao,
right,
who was hired as the chief strategy officer of the Mercedes-Benz Group worldwide. Now, this is the highest profile, I think, Asian C-level executive at a major global automaker.
Especially now that Hao Taitang is gone, right?
Yeah, and that's another extreme difference compared with, let's say, Stellantis. How Mercedes placing such importance on the Chinese market by hiring someone of his caliber, right? He's been at McKinsey for over 20 years. And we were just chatting off the record, and he's quite intelligent, I think. And Ola is like, he's in my ears all the time, and I'm like, he needs to be in your ears more times because of what's going on in China. And I think he said he's probably going to spend 2/3 of time. I don't remember exactly which is which, but 2/3 time in one region and a third in the other region for his job. And quite interesting. I'm still working on to possibly putting this interview it's already been recorded. So for our pod, if that's the case, Ola will be our highest profile guest to appear on the pod. So I hope that'll happen.
Henrik might be upset that you said that.
Well, I mean, good thing that Henrik is keeping his promise of starting production on November 17th. So
I'm just joking. But
no, I'm saying that it was actually a candid conversation, sort of like when I talked to Wallenstein.
right.
I think he did say to the effect a little bit more diplomatic about a level playing field, and he basically said, welcomes the Chinese EV Inc. to Europe because it's a natural thing to do, and just like Mercedes is in China. And I think also talking to some of the Mercedes engineers, they did with our conversation naturally went to Neil. And also some of the reporters that were there that are based either in UK or Germany. And I think one thing I heard was that if Neil, the ET7, some of them who's driven it, was benchmarked against, let's say, German engineering standards, there's still improvement. These are coming from the engineers as well as the local reporters.
Right.
So, but they said that it's well done. It should sell well. And now we just heard Neil pivoting to that purchase option, 2 weeks after launch. So they're listening to their customers. At least they're making changes quickly. And so hopefully, we'll share this contents of this conversation with Ola.
Nice.
Yeah, because for Mercedes, I think that the relationship goes really back 10 years. So at the end of 2012 is when they hired Hubertus Troska as their Daimler China head and also on the board. And it's been 10 years. And over the years, I've attended quite a few of their events. Over in 2016 when they announced the EQ brand and case, right? I was at the EQC global debut in 2018. I was at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 2019, and then speaking last to Ola in Guangzhou in 2019. So just kind of to see, I think I asked him about kind of the 6-year progression of the EQ and electrification strategy. And he said, it's a solid first few kilometers of a long marathon. So, and there's a lot more running to do. So now it's going to be all of these EQ products. They're on the EVA, what's called the EVA platform. In 2024, they're coming out with the MMA platform for the compacts, so for the C-Class sort of models. And then if you remember, in less than a year, they updated their strategy from leading electric to going all in, 2030, where markets allow, right? And he talked about Apple. He talked about, in China, really investing in local kind of R&D to have features that meet the local customer needs.
It's amazing. You think about this, Lei, it's amazing that these companies, Volkswagen, GM, Mercedes, have been doing business for over 30 years in China, and they're just now talking about investing in local R&D. That's how easy it was for them to make money, and now how the pendulum has swung so quickly and so violently that they're scrambling to try to build a quote unquote local product, or a product that has features that would be attractive to the local market, right? And so this is kind of a microcosm of why I feel that it's good for them to be humbled, because they've had it for the last 30 years so easy in China. So
yeah, and he's like, I plan to I want to go back to China and spend some time there. But,
because it's their most important market, bottom line.
And now we just heard that story from Handelsblatt on Olaf Scholz trying to have a delegation visiting China, right?
Yeah, he will.
That agenda, yeah.
And so I was contacted by a journalist about that. And this coming on the heels of Volkswagen's largest transaction in recent memory, and these companies retrenching, the German companies retrenching in China. So Scholz is going to have an interesting conversation, but I do want to emphasize that China EV Inc., the Chinese government, is going to have to either play nice or let their Chinese EV companies that are entering foreign markets risk them being shut out of the market, because there could be social media sentiment against them if the Chinese government does this or does that. That's never in the last 30 years, that's never happened, right? Because number one, there haven't been any Chinese companies really exporting anything. And then number two, the relationships with the Chinese government and other countries have normally been pretty good, but it's deteriorating. And Germany is one of the countries that I think is going to take they're going to take a much more confrontational view towards China moving forward, I was told. So,
yeah. So, and then the afternoon of the 17th, which was the media day for the Paris Motor Show, I spent just the whole afternoon just walking the show. And, Macron was there in the morning. I wasn't there. And I think he just walked right in. There was nothing like what happened when Biden visited the Detroit Auto Show. So I think people are saying, man, there's no security. You just, right? It was lax. So somebody could have just pulled out a gun or something, who knows? And I think there was some chatter about having some kind of a local requirements for these EV incentives. Let's say, would something happen like it must be produced in Europe to be able to enjoy certain incentives?
I don't think there's any doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so.
And I don't think that any of the Chinese EV companies believe that they can import their way into Europe. They have to build locally.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, but for now, so coming into the show, my summary was we knew that BYD, we knew that Great Wall Motors, Wei, and Aura were attending. That was the official. So I think that was so this is how I summarize coming into the show before I spend that time in the afternoon, that this will be dominated by the French homegrown brands, Renault Group and Stellantis, right? Half French, half dominated by Chinese brands. And the third of it, these local startups or other startups. So let's say Fisker was there, VinFast was there, Hopium, NamX, these French hydrogen kind of startups, and there's Microlino. I posted some videos on social. Microlino, the Swiss startup trying to kind of copy the Isetta,
Right.
the little car that you open, the door is in front of you, you open up. That was my expectation, but after
It's like these micro cars, right?
yeah. But after walking the show, man, my summary was full of surprises. I tweeted this crouching tiger, hidden dragon, full of confidence, and yet a lot of work to do. That was my assessment. And a total of, I counted 9. So either 9 Chinese brands or automakers that are under disguise were represented either directly or indirectly at the Paris Motor Show.
Right.
That I thought was quite surprising. I mean, BYD, Way, Aura, we talked about them all the time, but one interesting company is XEV. So this is a Italian-based startup that was started by Stanley Ludi, who used to be the head of design for JAC's European design organization based in Turin, in Italy. And he founded this company XEV in 2018. And they own a kind of like a contract manufacturer called Youyao. In English, is Yo-Yo. And the car being exhibited is also called the Yo-Yo. So like a 2-seater smart style EV. And his business model is manual battery swapping.
Okay.
So what he found out was in the 300 million, let's say, vehicle owners, he said in Europe, he said roughly a third of that don't have really good access to charging.
Right.
And really these small EVs, and I'll talk a little bit more on some of the other ones later, are really becoming attractive for local mobility. So he thought that these type of vehicles, he signed a deal with Eni, which is the Sinopec of Italy. They're probably the largest state-owned company and the largest, let's say, oil giant or energy giant in Italy that will work with them on setting up these footprints of these manual battery swapping stations. Basically, what happens is you drive your car and you go up to these stations, and there will be people physically taking out batteries from the station to your car or vice versa to swap the batteries. And there's 3 sets of batteries. They're really heavy. And the cars themselves are you may have heard XEV, they have a lot of 3D printed parts. So the door side panels, the front fascia are 3D printed. These things, they sell for about 15,000 euros. And with incentives, they can go down to 12,000 euros. And he's saying that they've already sold 10,000 units. Mostly, I think he says 7 countries, including Italy. And they're offered in, let's say, different models. I mean, different purchase models. You can buy them, you can rent them, you can lease them.
Are they legally considered a passenger vehicle or a motorcycle? Or
Yes. And the cars are actually nicely designed. There's a keyless entry, and there's these frameless doors. And when you close the door, the window goes up automatically. The what do you call it? These are only found on like premium cars. So he's saying that this is really the model trying to aimed at the masses who don't have access to charging. And he's planning to set up a huge footprint of these manual battery swap stations, which is a lot less involvement in upfront investment. So a few tens of thousands of euros, rather than, let's say, a regular gas station would be €1 million, or a swap station, which will be,
he's still going to need an energy partner to.
That's Eni.
Well, those batteries that's for Italy though, right?
Yeah.
But if he expands out past Italy, then he's going to have to find partnerships with individual.
Sure. But any so far is their biggest partner that they've signed up. So I thought that was interesting. But like XCV, when you go look at the booth, you wouldn't know that this is a Chinese. It's under disguise. And he's saying that he's trying to launch this model in China starting in the second quarter of next year. Yeah. So I think the manufacturing, the Youyao, I think it's based in Hefei, where JAC is based. Yeah, so that's one of the surprises or.
But this is one of those things, Lei, that I guess he gets a 3,000 euro subsidy, but if they change the requirements on that, he's going to be shut out of it, right? So
there are risks.
He's got to be careful about that. I'm not saying that someone wouldn't buy it at 15,000 euro, but they would at 12,000. But this is just an example of importing risk, right?
Yeah. And so that's XEV. And then similarly is the Dacia Springo, which is a no-frills EV selling for just under 20,000 euros. And I talked to this guy called Xavier Martinet, who is the senior VP of marketing sales at Dacia. And I chatted with him for a couple of minutes, and he said, retail, the Dacia Springo is the top-selling EV in France, not including the fleet sales. But including fleet sales, he said number one is, guess who? You never guess the model. It's the Peugeot E2008 for French market. It's the number one, including everything, fleet sales and private. And he said, interestingly, the Dacia Springo has a conquest rate of 80%. And what happens is a lot of these premium buyers who already own premium cars, they buy this Dacia Springo for local driving.
Yeah.
And this is a car made by the joint venture EGT, which is between Renault, Nissan, and Dongfeng. I believe this is made in Shiyan in Hubei province. And it's selling very well. And it's a China-made EV. So that's another way that Chinese is coming or has already arrived. And then a similar model is the Mobilize Limo, which is produced by the JMEV. So the other Renault joint venture in China with JMC. In Chinese, the model is called the E. And seriously, all of these, maybe except the Dacia Springo, the BYDs and the Great Walls and is limo. If you look at the build quality, if you look inside, whether exterior, I mean, you really can't relate them to Chinese cars or Chinese level quality anymore. They're just, if you slap a Mercedes, if you slap some other brands on it, you wouldn't tell because it's so well done. I think that was the other thing I found, that even compared to 2019, I think it's a huge step up in terms of build quality, perceptive quality, and in some ways even better, I think, than.
I think that's the whole point, right? The proof is in the pudding. These cars are starting to enter Europe, and you're not hearing any headlines about build quality. You're not hearing about these Chinese features that are trying to be sold to Europeans, right? So it is not going to be an issue of quality, reliability, inferior design. It's going to be about protections,
politics,
like the IRA from the United States, and highly likely going to have a European equivalent. And, at the end of the day, this is where I'm a little bit torn, right? The United States talks about free trade and how we're a free trade country. And I'm all for that, because as a consumer who works hard to earn his money, I want the best products that I can buy for my money, full stop. And so I get that part of it. But I also feel, and this is me wearing my US hat, that it has been unfair that Facebook, Google have not been a part of the China market, right? And so where do we go from there as China at least in the automotive standpoint, really, really hits its stride because, like you said, it's not going to be a quality issue. It's not going to be a reliability issue. It's not going to be a design issue. It's going to be a protection issue about whether or not Chinese EVs will be accepted in other parts of the world outside of China. So right now, it's theoretical in the United States, but it's starting to happen in Europe. And the Europeans better move quickly. Otherwise, before they know it, there's going to be 24 brands, either through a joint venture with a European partner or a Chinese brand, full-fledged Chinese brand that's going to be over there. And it's going to be taking sales from Dacia. It's going to be taking sales from Peugeot. It's going to be taking sales from Renault. And then there's going to be this backlash, right? So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the happy balance is. I do know that the foreign legacies, whether they're American or whether they're in Europe, they need to step up. And there needs to be no excuses about whether or not they can compete. They need to have more products in the market. They better have better products, cheaper products that can compete side by side on a feature and on a price standpoint. Because currently in the United States, at least, they don't. And as long as China EV Inc. hasn't come in multiple brands to the United States, there's still an opportunity for the US legacies to kind of flood the market with great product, right? That's affordable.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think when we talk about, quality, I said Mercedes, they will have their benchmark on how good the engineering of the vehicle is, but it's really no longer this Chinese brand image of poor quality, cheap, although that still sells. I mean, the Dacia Springo is a no-frills, definitely a no-frills EV, but these others, that the BYDs that are priced in the high, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 euros. Yeah, it might be high, but at least, the build quality is there. The feel is there, the touch and feel. And then also the MG Marvel R was exhibited at a kind of a joint booth. Also, were at the same booth as where the Fisker Ocean was exhibited. This was a booth of the CA Mobility. It's part of the also an Italian company, like a dealer financing. Not Italian. CA is the French bank, the 信业银行. I forgot the English. That's offering these models. And I spoke to an MG Motor finance guy. And, he says, this MG has benefited impartially of the British heritage. So it's a Chinese brand, but at the same time, it's not a Chinese brand. And it's selling pretty well as well. And then lastly is this French company called Espace Véhicule Électrique, or EV in short, which showed a couple of Ceres models and hiding in the back the Leapmotor T03 and the C11. And the guy I talked to said the Leapmotor, these two cars, they plan to launch either end of this year or early next year. And this is not official yet. So, I mean, Leapmotor, officially, they didn't make any news out of this. Right. So, So I think that's it. That's all the Chinese brand, I think, right? So BYD, Way, Aura, Mobilize Limo, Dacia Springo, MG, Ceres, and Leapmotor. So these are the 9.
Well, I'm glad you were able to get a lot out of this, man. It sounds like you packed a lot of research in 48 hours, and so
you know what? We've been talking on this show this is our 88th episode, and we've been talking about China EVs, and I've not physically touched a China EV until now. So I think it was due.
We should also have folks Google Paris Auto Show, because a lot of headlines will say Paris Auto Show, China electric vehicles or China EVs, enter or flourish, or coming out parties. So we weren't the only ones that noticed the number and quantity of products from China at the Paris Auto Show. So,
Yep. And so in terms of the size of the show is really 2 halls. So hall 4 and hall 6, and each hall had a few Chinese brands.
bigger than Detroit or 差不多?
I would say size-wise, it's probably a 2 Detroit. So there's 2 halls, and each hall is probably the size of the Detroit Auto Show. So roughly. And there was at the end of the afternoon, there was third-party organization that were organizing test drives. So I signed up for a test drive of the BYD Atto 3. I had to do it because, right? I mean, if I'm there, then maximize my time, right? So I did, and driving on the streets, awesome car. Features are very quirky, as you've seen on my tweet.
Right.
It's good all-around car, 38,000 euros. But we've also heard there's, I said a lot of work to do, right?
Yeah.
What's happening in Australia of the same Atto 3. I'm not sure if the features are the same, and you had asked me to check the middle seat, and I didn't have a chance to do it. But
well, I think they are. I think BYD is shipping that as a 4-seater in Europe, but they don't have that reg.
Okay.
They don't have that middle hook reg in Europe that Australia does. So
right, and they did get a 5-star Euro NCAP.
Right.
Which the I think the Whey Coffee 01 and the Aura Funky Cat, I think they also got 5 stars. I think I read that somewhere.
We just have to remind our listeners that the Australian market is one of the most stringent for homologation and safety standards in the world. And so just because a car passes safety regs in Europe or the UK, it does not mean it's going to pass in Australia.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and so for BYD, I posted some videos. Great Wall. So the only regret that I have is I tried to talk to for BYD. It was Michael Shu, who is their European head. He's Chinese, and for Great Wall, it was this guy called Mr. Meng. And I talked to their PR people, and they said, oh, they're all packed with interviews and events in the afternoon. But BYD, they were support staff that came from Shenzhen. And so they have to go back and quarantine. And
well, that's the other thing, too, because Li Bin and Li Hong are...
they're quarantining right now.
Yes, because of the Guangzhou Auto Show, right? And the events surrounding December is going to be Neo Day, right? So,
yeah,
man, give us 6 months, Lei, and they'll be inviting us to these events. They won't say that there's too many and too busy. They'll be wanting us to be part of these events.
Yeah, so for me, the China factor in Paris was, having been able to talk to Ola and Paul off the record. You heard about Carlos' comments on China, and then speaking to these people at these Chinese brands.
Let me also really quickly say, Lei, I don't think Tavares' comments were that controversial, to be quite frank.
I agree. But the Chinese chatters really dunked on him.
Yes, because of the thin skin that they tend to have.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So to me, that was a nothing burger.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think he was trying to create waves, right, or make waves. But
and my other comment is just these Chinese brands. They right that the French is sont arrivés. They've arrived, but they need to be humble about the market because, right, all the either politics or something else that need to be careful. But quality wise, they're there, man. They're
as you state that about Paris and France, there's an SCMP article that just posted on Twitter that says the EU leaders talked to Schultz and said no separate deals with China. So
yeah,
let me unpack for a minute or two my couple days in San Francisco. And I was invited by a licensing organization called LES, LES, they had their US North America conference in San Francisco. And this particular panel was for automotive licensing. And so I was the only non-lawyer on the panel. And it was a room full, it was a breakout room, and there's probably 50 people in it. 3 panelists, Steve Geisler, I think he's the North American general counsel for Huawei.
Oh.
And Sunny, I want to say Huang, who is a partner at a Pittsburgh law firm that does IP law for her clients and her Chinese clients in the US or vice versa. So anyways, we got into a discussion about the escalated restrictions on the chips and on the capital equipment and how US employees in China working for either these equipment companies, these chip companies, or for these Chinese chip design and fabrication companies have been put in a really, really tough spot. And, I think we could be starting to see the bifurcation that people are talking about between the United States and China on the technology side. I sure hope there's a middle ground or an off ramp so that things don't keep on escalating. But for the United States to drop those increased restrictions on China during the week of the 20th Party Congress, I'm sure that's not lost on the Chinese government. And I'm sure that there was an article, was it Reuters or Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, that said that the Chinese government is scrambling to assess what it all means, what these new restrictions mean. And so I'm assuming that within the end of the year, by the end of the year, there's going to be some sort of response or retaliation. There always is. And so it's unfortunate because there are people that are going to get caught in a crossfire. Some of them are probably friends of ours, and tough choices are going to have to be made likely over the next 6-12 months. But our consensus was that we didn't see the United States government really easing off. And so this could complicate things for ADAS systems in Chinese EVs in the next 12, 18, 24 months. It could complicate things for autonomous vehicle startups in China. So, and I think it's an important thing to really, really keep a close eye on. And then, really quickly, the Volkswagen Group announcement also happened right after that, right? So was that a coincidence? Was Volkswagen aware that this was going to happen? Maybe, right? And so they decided that they needed to protect themselves by making this investment in Horizon. So to me, it all is related, some way, somehow. So
it feels like one of those a step forward here and another step backward there kind of things, right? Case in point, BMW Group's investment with Envision, AESC, which is a Chinese company, and nowhere in their press release said this was a Chinese company.
It said it was Japanese. The press releases said it was Japanese, and which was a head scratcher to me.
I saw some people posting in WeChat moments saying, "Oh, this is BMW with this Chinese company," right?
I couldn't believe it. There's two articles that I read. They both said that AESC was Japanese. So
yeah, well, there's Japanese involvement.
Yes, and wasn't it acquired by Nissan from Nissan?
Yeah. That was a few years ago. I think before the pandemic.
But I don't think Nissan has anything to do with them anymore.
No.
Because
I don't think so. Not anymore.
I'll be quite honest with you, Lei. And about 4 or 5 years ago, my buddy who works in private equity in China was looking at that transaction a Chinese private equity firm was looking to buy that because Nissan was offloading it, right? Yeah, it's kind of funny that the media just can't get it right,
Yeah, and at the same time, the $2.8 billion grant on those 20 companies in the U.S., right? Cathodes, anodes, recycling, and then plus, again, our Next Energy, they had the official opening, was it, of their HQ or
And BMW also announced an investment in Spartanburg, South Carolina, to prep their factory for 4 EVs that are going to be built there.
Six.
And then
6X EVs.
And then $1 billion, or they didn't disclose the amount, but was it the AESC? It's not an AESC factory in Spartanburg, but it's a different battery cell manufacturer that's also going to be investing. And so in a short period of time, we've seen billions of dollars worth of announcements and investments in the US for battery cell capacity. And then friend of Sino Auto Insights and China EVs and More, Paul Leinart,
yeah, I saw that.
just posted an article, a Reuters article. Paul Leinart works for Reuters as a journalist, automotive journalist here in Ann Arbor. He said that they did a recalc and there is a total of $1.2 trillion that has been announced that's going to be invested in electric vehicle manufacturing and battery cell manufacturing
globally, right?
By 2030. Okay. So there's going to be a lot. I feel that we don't need to say this because we've been evangelists for so long, Lei, but we've been preaching about this, me for the better part of 4 years, and then me with you for the last 2 years, right? So it's good that people are actually being able to see and feel how tangible this is, but it's also going to have these other things that go along with it, right? These challenges between the US and China, and there's going to be a lot of literal politics, not red tape politics, literal politics and diplomacy that is going to need to be worked out if China EV Inc. is going to reach its full potential globally, right? And so that's really all I had. I think you did a great summary of the Paris Auto Show. Anything else? Because I'd like to open up the room up.
No, I'm sure there were a bunch of news out of China that we probably missed, or at least I missed.
But it was the tail end of October holiday too, so I don't think there was a ton.
Our friend, it looks like you met up with Frank.
Yes,
and he posted some update on the Jidu, the first the prototype. Or?
Yeah, so they're going to show it on October 27th, and I got invited, of course, and then. There's 3 or 4 companies that asked if I was going to be in Guangzhou. Unfortunately, I will not be. So we'll have to watch them. So we're going to have to stream them, basically. But
on Mondays is also the XPeng's 1024 Tech Day. And then next week, supposedly that brand launches, right? You remember, right?
Yes.
If they still stick to that date that they said.
Which is 50-50, because you know them and I know them. and just because they say something, it'll change 5 times before.
Well, the other thing I thought of was what you shared, Lei Jun's posting on Twitter of Xiaomi's ambitions of selling 10 million EVs.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
And we didn't even talk about Foxconn, how Foxconn wants to be 50% of the market of contract manufacturing.
Yeah, so is huge lofty goals.
There's no lack of ambition between NIO, Foxconn, Xiaomi, but I will have to say, and I don't think it was a translation thing. I think that he's oversimplifying, and if he thinks it is just a connected consumer product, he's going to be sadly mistaken, because it's much more complicated than that. And I hope that was just an oversimplification of how he was describing it, and not the company's approach to developing and building this Xiaomi car. Because I just don't agree with it, because a car is never going to be a consumer product just because of the fact that it's a dangerous, projectile that can go 100 miles an hour and hurt somebody, right? And so you can't treat it the same way. Man, I just think that's an oversimplification and kind of lazy. But anyways.
Yeah, he'll probably be in for a rude awakening. And a device is certainly not a mobile phone device.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we're talking about cars becoming a device.
And that's the other thing too, because from a manufacturing standpoint is completely different. And then number two, my point earlier that it is not something that you can just call somebody with. It is something that if pointed in the wrong direction could really be dangerous. But let's open the room up if anyone has any questions. The other thing I wanted to talk about, let me see here.
Congrats to our good friends at RoboSense on opening their Plymouth office.
Yes.
So after Septon, we have another LiDAR company establishing presence in the greater Detroit area.
And unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but I will try to stop by in the near future. The other thing that I think, so you had talked about Frank. So Frank Wu, Jidu, head of design, originally spent 8 years at Cadillac here in Detroit. He's back, picked up an award in Singapore for the Red Dot. He's on his way to Japan in a week to pick up another design award for the vehicle and the charging station that they designed. So congratulations to Frank. Super great guy, very Midwest like me. And they have a few surprises. Jidu does at the Guangzhou Auto Show that I will not mention.
Guangzhou, well, he already shared that in our pod. So maybe there'll be more.
Yeah. And most of what we talked about was off the record, but I'll be able to talk to you about it anyways. But yeah, he's been super excited. He did clarify that the Jidu Auto is aiming for Tesla. That's from a feature standpoint and from a market standpoint. So I don't think that is any secret. So, but because you and I were speculating at that price point and those features, who his competitors were or who Jidu's competitors were, but he did articulate that they're going right after Tesla's customers. So good luck to him on that.
Not surprising. I mean, the 200,000 price range.
I did want to talk about one post I had in my newsletter, and that was that a CNEV Post did a price breakdown of market share at certain price points. And it was triggered by your talking about the cheaper cars, right?
The below 300,000 RMB.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I saw that, yeah.
And so we talk about NIO, we talk about BYD, and BYD kind of fits into what I'm about to talk about, and Xpeng kind of fits, but NIO doesn't fit, Li Auto doesn't fit, Hi-Fi doesn't fit. What other brands that we talk about? When we talk about 7 million cars,
Voya is priced pretty high.
Yeah, when we talk about 6.5 to 7 million vehicles, NIO's never going to push that number up. Tesla will dictate some of that number. BYD will dictate some of that number, but they're not going to be the volume drivers, obviously. And what's important to note is that 67% of all BEVs, CNEV Post specified BEVs, are under 300,000 RMB in China when they're sold, which means that they're under $45,000. And if we look at the under 200,000 RMB price point, it's 41%. Okay, so almost half of the cars that are sold in China that are battery electric vehicles are less than $30,000. Okay, so we talk about probably 10, 20, 30 brands on a rotation basis, right, Lei? But there are dozens of other brands in China that we never talk about that are contributing to this 6.5, 7 million units, right?
And look who just made a comeback. Zotye. Zotye is back producing EVs.
Is it Zotye or is it Zotya?
Zotye, yeah.
I don't know how to say it. I have no idea.
There's
zombies. And there are zombies.
Yeah.
Because I posted a couple of newsletters back that I congratulated Leap for IPOing, but I was like 12 months into
the stocks are just dismal right now. Oh my
God.
Including Tesla, right?
Yeah.
It's just bloodbath, I think.
Yes. And this is the crazy thing, right? So somebody had asked me this and I forget. For 2022, because of COVID, because of the supply chain, the Chinese government created an additional subsidy where any vehicle that's traded in could receive a discount, right? Was it? That's in addition to all the other subsidies that are already in place, correct? So they
Yeah.
only added one subsidy, right? And then at the end of 2022, that's going to go away, correct? And so, 2023, I'm predicting that we're going to see a lot of consolidation, a lot of closures. I think Faraday might actually close up shop in 2023 because if the Chinese government is not going to maintain, increase, or find different ways to keep the market stimulated, if we're going into a global recession, then the less capitalized, the less well capitalized Chinese EV companies, they're just going to have nowhere to hide, right? So I think it's going to be 2023 is going to be a really interesting year, not only because China EV Inc. will have mostly entered China already and will start sending more volume that way, but then we'll also see in the United States where the charging infrastructure starts showing up and some of these cars getting closer and closer. The end of 23, we'll see probably 6, 7, 8 cars, including the Silverado EV, which is going to be huge for the US market. But we'll also see Xiaomi's car, we'll see Jidu Auto's Robo One in production form. So there's still some exciting cars that are coming out, but those less well capitalized EVs are going to have a very, very difficult time in 2023. Winter is coming.
Yeah, so the suspense is Q4 this year for China at least is going to be, is it going to be the last hurl? And then for 2023, is it going to be a thud?
What do you think?
That's the suspense. I think it's going to continue to grow no matter what.
But not at 50%, not at 100%, right?
Ola, he said, I asked him whether he was surprised to see China's NEV market this year. And he said, no. He said, when that technology reaches a certain threshold, it's going to be faster than people think. And so it's not going to have the growth of the past 2 years, certainly, but right, if you look at the penetration, you look at the percentages, their EVs are becoming your everyday vehicles to buy.
Man, brilliant minds think alike, because right before I got on, I forwarded, I quote tweeted the Paul Leiner article, and I said that it's going to be a trickle, because, $1.2 trillion of investment, that's going to hit and be effective in the next 24, 36 months in the United States, right?
Yeah. I think Q4 really, we NIOs, all these companies, they need to prove themselves. Really, that's what we're looking to.
NIO,
are they going to get to that?
NIO has primed the pump, right? You and I believe they primed the pump. The ET5 is set to be a really, really high runner for them. The ES7, I think it'll be okay, but this is, and I just saw another article, and I'd heard rumors about this, but it looks like Xpeng is reorging some of its...
It's reorganizing.
Yeah. So you had heard the same rumor?
Yes.
So I'd heard that rumor.
It's forthcoming. This announcement is probably coming next week.
Yeah.
Some of the reorganization on into BUs, business units. So
because you do know what, last month I was on that call with Brian, and I said that the challenges in Europe, and he didn't like me saying that.
I actually bumped into Brian in Paris on the show floor. He was walking with his one of his probably European guys and 2 other Chinese, maybe high ups. And I told him where to look for Chinese cars. And he was cool. And also I spotted Hui Zhang at the BYD booth. But I was walking by, I was in a hurry, so I didn't get a chance to. But you see, right, these people are out there scouting.
Well, not only that, but the thing is, the reason Brian Gu is probably there is because they fired his international head, right? So, or he left the company. They didn't say.
Yeah, so that's why I say, it's full of surprises. You never know who you see.
Yeah, if no one has any questions, maybe we close it out here.
Sure. I think that was a It's another. I'm after Detroit, Paris. Next will be LA.
Yes. So Alfred, I'm totally sorry that we weren't able to get together. I'm going to DM you the dates that I'm back in SF next month, and we will break bread or have a drink with you, probably, Lei, right? So
Yeah.
I know that Alfred also wants us to go check out one of his portfolio companies, so maybe we could go do that too. So
Yeah, and I feel really, really lucky and fortunate to be able to do this, traveling internationally, especially seeing a few Chinese media, how when they go back, the ordeals that they have to go through. So I treasure every moment that I get these opportunities to be out there. I'll show you some screenshots of what they have to go through.
yeah, no, so
go through. Yeah,
you know, Paul Yang, he's posting on LinkedIn.
Yeah, he's
right.
He's from Hong Kong. He's over there in Beijing quarantining. Yeah.
I feel very lucky as well because I told you on WeChat that I just booked my ticket. And so to do that without hesitation is actually pretty significant, because 9 weeks ago, I was like, man, I don't want to leave Beijing, right? I don't want to go to Shanghai. I don't want to go to Guangzhou. I don't want to go to Shenzhen because there's risk.
The CIIE is coming up in 2 weeks, and they require whoever attends this to stay within the city the 10 days before the event, to not go anywhere else. So that's the fine print.
And this is me being the cynic. Remember that there are people and companies that are making tons of money in China that administer the tests, that sell the masks, that do all these things, that have the quarantine hotels. So, I mean, there's so many different reasons why certain groups in China do not want zero COVID policy to change, right? And that's why well into 23, we're going to have to quarantine if we want to go to China. Full stop. I truly believe that. So,
well, now they have this, 2+5 or something, or 5+2?
Yes.
Rumored. But we digress.
So thanks for joining, everyone. I hope you all have a good weekend. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Lei, have a good weekend. And I'll talk to you on WeChat.
Same to you, and same to all of you. All right, talk to you next week.
Bye. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at Leixing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.